Hello everyone, welcome back to On The Fly. Today we're taking another fantasy hockey video. Today's topic will be 5 buy low, sell high players, November edition. I did make an October edition of this sort of topic. Link can be found in the description below. But with that, we'll get right into today's video. So obviously the buy low guys are guys that haven't quite got off to the starts they wanted, maybe on the injured reserve. So that's really the main kind of two topics, guys that haven't hit their peak yet. And as for the sell high guys, obviously guys you're looking to trade, maybe pick up to trade, but mainly just head forth to trade them. I think, in my opinion at least, they've reached their maximum potential. You may disagree. Please do leave your comments down below. I'd be happy to discuss that with you. But with that, we'll get right into it, starting with player number 1, Mark Stone. So before he went on the injured reserve, 2 games played, 0 goals, 3 assists. +2, 2 penalty minutes, and 0 shots on goal over the 2 games he played. Right now, he is on the injured reserve, basically week to week. I think he will be back probably within 2 weeks, but it's not really confirmed yet. So if you can jump the gun, acquire him through trade, acquire him off waivers. There are some leagues where there is trouble on the injured reserve. You can pick him up off waivers. Definitely suggested he is going to be a top player once he returns. And I think while he is gone, it does make a lot of sense to chase him. Obviously, he is probably one of the top sort of scorers in the Western Conference. And I think overall, once he gets back, and plus with another guy that I'm about to mention with Jack Eichel, I think he will be an absolute powerhouse in the Pacific Division. Moving on to the second player on this list is Jesse Pugliarvi. So with him, 11 games played, 6 goals, 7 assists, +6 penalty minutes, and 25 shots on goal. This is really good for him. Obviously, he is playing alongside McDavid. He's playing alongside Draisaitl, Hyman, Nugent Hopkins, all these guys. He is playing top-line minutes. But the one part that is very surprising about this guy that doesn't really appear on the score sheet is that he wasn't really playing power play minutes. He was playing second-line power play. But with recently, at least, he has found his way onto the top power play line, which makes him that much more valuable for your team, and especially if he can keep the role, which it does look like he's doing, and you can start to see his production. He is going to skyrocket, so I definitely do suggest you pick up Jesse Pugliarvi from either waivers or acquire him through a trade. He hasn't quite reached his potential yet, so if you can buy him nice and cheap, I would definitely suggest you do that. Moving on to the third player on the list, we have Drew Doughty. So he is on the injured reserve as of right now. Looking at a return of most likely late December, early January. 4 games played, 1 goal, 6 assists, +2 and 2 penalty minutes, and 6 shots on goal. Was the stat line before he left for the injured reserve. So overall with Drew Doughty, obviously the name for himself speaks. And I think overall, what you're going to get out of him is a lot of quality minutes, lots of power play points, lots of shorthanded points at that. And I think overall, you can really start to expect high points once he returns. He is sort of the him and Kopitar will be the main sources of points, of goals. And I think overall, if you can pick up Drew Doughty while he's injured, most leagues have him on the free agent waiver wire, and I think if you can grab him, definitely worth it to hold for 2 months. I think he is worth your spot, especially if you have someone that is sort of iffy in that IR spot. Obviously, it is a tough sort of call whether to keep a guy that might be coming back sooner or to try and take the long-term play with a guy like Doughty. But I think overall, getting a guy like Doughty is definitely worth your time. It may be worth sort of dropping that soon, or maybe drop a guy that's playing right now to get that long-term asset in Drew Doughty. Moving on to the fourth player on this list is Jeff Petry. So this guy has been on a very poor start, to say the least, to his season. 14 games played, 0 goals, 2 assists, -2 penalty minutes, and 16 shots on goal. One of these situations where he seems to be doing pretty much everything right, just not really finding the back of the net as much as he'd like to. Last season, he did have an absolute great year. Definitely one of the top defenseman, especially in fantasy with all of his goals. 43 points, 56 games, definitely something to take note of, especially as a defenseman. But unfortunately for him, has not quite found it to start the year. And once again, I think if you can buy him nice and low at a 2 assist sort of marker, over 14 games, I think it's definitely worth your time. And really, he's one of those guys who hopefully will bounce back. I do suggest picking him up, taking the gamble. Give whoever you're trading with some low sort of pick that you drafted with, in hope that he turns into what he used to be. I think without a doubt he has the potential to do so. He's proven it, and he's still sort of got the trust of his coach. So I think the more sort of Petry gets going, the more confident they go, and the Habs sort of start to bounce back. Petry will be a leading source of that, especially with their captain Shea Weber out. I think it is definitely a possibility for Petry to go off, to get a whole bunch of points, to get a whole bunch of your, basically lead your team to the fantasy championship. So I do suggest Jeff Petry as your go-to option. I suggest him more than pretty much everyone else on this list. I don't see anybody who you really should get more than Jeff Petry as of right now. Sort of a low-risk player, especially if you can acquire him nice and sort of cheap. There are quite a few managers that are displeased with them, to put it nicely, and they are starting to look to trade him. So if you can buy him nice and low, I definitely suggest you do so. And moving on to the final player of this list with Jack Eichel. So once again, obviously the Jack Eichel saga has concluded with him being traded to the Vegas Golden Knights. So as for the fantasy option of Jack Eichel, for me, I do definitely suggest you do pick him up. He is, once again, 3 to 4 months out from being NHL ready, playable, but I think even with those 3 to 4 months, once he comes back, he will be an absolute stud for your team. Overall, you'll get a lot of goals, assists, points, good plus minus, not a lot of penalty minutes, lots of shots on goal. Really everything you could ask for in a fantasy asset. And I think once he comes back, you will start to see what really Buffalo is going to be missing. Obviously lots of power play minutes, a little bit of penalty kill, not too much. Obviously Vegas does have their sort of starters in terms of the penalty kill, but once that Vegas power play really gets going, it's going to be tough to stop them. And I think overall in the end, Eichel is going to be a key source of that offense for the Vegas Golden Knights. And I think if you can acquire him early, obviously he is still on the waiver wire in most leagues. Trade him. Once again, he is going quite cheap right now. If you can find somebody that is willing to trade him, just don't pay too high, because obviously he is still 3 to 4 months out. And then there's also added time after that, which who knows how long that could be. But overall, I think Jack Eichel is someone who is somebody you want to pick up, especially if he's free. I think he is worth that IR spot overall. But once again, up to your discretion. Don't pay too much for him, but it's definitely worth picking him up at a low value. Moving on to these sell-high players. So these, once again, are players that have gotten off to good starts, and I do think that they are going to be starting to sort of run out of steam. I think they've hit their peak and then sort of just go downhill from here. So starting off with the first option of Zach Hyman. 11 games played, 7 goals, 3 assists, -3, 6 penalty minutes, and 35 shots on goal. So with Zach Hyman, once again, as I spoke earlier with Jesse Puljujarvi, that's the spot that Puljujarvi is taking over. Hyman is off the first power play unit, and he's gone down to the second power play unit, sort of switched roles with Puljujarvi, and has taken over the top line. And I think with Hyman going down to the second line, still a viable fantasy option, but I think with him starting to get minimum or minimal sort of power play minutes, diminishes his value in fantasy. And I think if you are looking for a top fantasy option, obviously you're looking at guys like McDavid, Draisaitl, McKinnon, Matthews. But once you start getting to the depth guys, if you can get rid of a guy like Hyman, who's already shown he's just pretty much on a point per game sort of streak, I think if you can trade him now, it's worth your time to trade him. He has, once again, lost his power play minutes. He's not playing top line. So if you can sort of get a high value trade for him. Obviously, Hyman does have value name, and people are still looking for him. So I think if you can trade him, I did recommend it in my 3 players to draft video. And I think right now is the perfect time to trade him. High value, look for a mid-round, early mid-round pick in exchange for him. But overall, I think Hyman is a great player to sell now, because I do believe this will be the highest and how much he will peak in terms of his fantasy value. Moving on to the second option on this list is Frederik Andersen. 9-1-0, 939 save percentage, 173 goals against average, and 1 shutout. So with Frederik Andersen, obviously once again has gotten off to a rocket hot start, and he's really been dominant overall. Hasn't given much to their backup Antti Ranta, but the one thing I do have concerns about is they're going to start to lose. And I think once they lose, you will see Andersen start to crumble. He did the same thing with the Leafs in years past, and once they do start losing, it goes tumbling, and eventually it just gets bad, and Andersen finds his way onto the injured report. So I do think it is something to take note of, because it has happened in years past where once they start to lose bad, and he starts getting hurt, and there's injuries, and there's all this other stuff. So I think it is important to note that Andersen, although he has gotten off a really solid start, might be the perfect time to get rid of him, mainly just because he isn't going to be maintaining a 9-1 record. I think this will be the peak of his sort of streak, and I think he will sort of cool down to the goalie we sort of remember with the Leafs, not being the superstar sort of with Anaheim. But I think it is something to take note of, that he will sort of flatten out eventually. And I think it is important to sort of get rid of him right now, especially if you can get high value. Look for once again, an early to mid-round pick. If you can do so, without a doubt, trade him. And I think overall, it is worth getting rid of him right now. I think if you can find a goalie off waivers that sort of fits your needs, once again, I did make a video on that as well. Link will also be down in the description. But overall, I think it is very good to trade him now. I think it will be beneficial in the long run for your team, especially once he starts to lose, because he's going to start to lose bad eventually, and then it's just going to be another tumbling weed. But with that, we move on to the third player on this list, with another guy that has got off to another rocket hot start with Troy Terry. So 13 games played, 9 goals, 8 assists, a +1 with 4 penalty minutes and 29 shots on goals. So with Troy Terry, once again, another guy really hot, and I think overall it is going to be tough to trade him. Similar to Kyle Connor, I think he does have the potential to sort of keep going with this pace. But I think if you find the right deal for him, definitely do not be afraid to get rid of him. And I think overall, he is sort of going to start flatlining to what we do remember him with Anaheim as of last year, the year before that. Not being a superstar threat, but I think in general he does have the potential to be that superstar player in Anaheim. Obviously not too much there, and I think if you can continue to sort of take note of what he's doing, don't go crazy with him, but at the same time, definitely keep monitoring it. If he does start to show signs of slowing, probably trade him pretty quickly. And I think overall, if you can, try and get rid of him for another sort of higher drafted player. Look again, once again, early to mid-round pick. If you can grab that, without a doubt, send it. But I think if you can, if you do want to keep him, definitely a solid choice. I do suggest not trading him right away, but also not holding on to him for too long. Moving on to the fourth player on this list with Brent Burns. 12 games played, 1 goal, 11 assists, +1, 6 penalty minutes, and 43 shots on goal. So with Brent Burns, once again, he is a player that is going to be losing out on power play time, especially once with the return of Erik Karlsson. So with Burns, I think it is definitely well worth it to sort of trade him now. I don't see him getting his value too high, but I think as of right now, Brent Burns does have the highest potential he will receive probably ever for this season at least. So I do suggest trading him. Once again, if you can get that mid to early round pick, without a doubt, do it. And I think with Burns, as sort of the value is right now, even a mid-round pick is definitely worth the trade. But overall, I think Brent Burns, if you want to keep him, just keep monitoring what Erik Karlsson's doing, because as soon as he comes back, Burns is probably going to be losing all his value. So it is definitely worth it to to sort of keep monitoring that situation. Don't necessarily trade him right away, but also make sure that obviously Karlsson is staying away from Burns' sort of minutes and playing time overall. Moving on to the final player on this list, happens to be another goalie, with Jacob Markstrom, 5-2-3, 940 save percentage, 1.69 goals against average, and 4 shutouts. So with 4 shutout Markstrom, I think it is time to trade him. I think especially with them being Calgary, not necessarily being a top contending team as of right now, I think it is important to note that Markstrom, although he is a sort of only goalie, not very many backups in Calgary as of right now, but in general they do have to start worrying that Markstrom is on Calgary. Calgary isn't going to win a lot of games, and in most leagues, wins for goalies are the most important part. So in general, you do have to take note that Calgary is not going to be a superstar team, but I think it is important still to try and trade him at maximum value. If you can sell somebody on the 4 shutouts, I think it is definitely worth it, especially if you can get, once again, that sort of early to mid-round pick. For Markstrom, without a doubt, do it. I think also with Markstrom, sort of a mid-round pick might be worth it as well. Flip him for like a forward, a defenseman. I wouldn't really suggest trading Markstrom for another goalie, because typically you're going to lose that deal. But in general, if you can get a sort of a mid-round forward, I think, or an early-round defenseman, I think without a doubt, trade him. And I think overall it will be an absolute steal for you. But with that, thank you so much for watching. If you made it this far in the video, like it if you liked it, drop a like if you really liked it, consider subscribing, tell all your friends, and leave a comment down below your thoughts on my list. Until next time, see ya.